Welcome to another podcast episode, everybody. For today's topics, we'll be talking about Sonic the Hedgehog 2, Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga, and Morbius. As always, we go from left to right, and I'll say that Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is definitely one of the best video game movies out there. Sure, it's not really saying much because a lot of the competition is very low, but overall, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is just a fun experience all around. I like the characters. I like the fact that we're slowly progressing ourselves closer and closer to Sonic's world. The first movie was all right. I think it definitely had a sort of cliche trope of a cartoony character living in a real world with all the sort of like traditional tropes that we've seen, with Looney Tunes back in action, um, that Tom and Jerry movie, I guess, along with other things that sort of like it. It's been there, done that, but thankfully, Sonic the Hedgehog realizes that eventually we're going to have to move away from, you know, the real world settings and get ourselves closer and closer to Sonic's own universe. And I appreciate the fact that we're starting to do that with this movie, at least, especially since we have Tails looking for Sonic, while Robotnik and Knuckles decide to team up, knowing the fact that they could get the Master Emerald away from Sonic, believing that he would probably use it in some way, shape, or form. We find out the fact that the Master Emerald is located within one of the islands of Earth, hidden away, and as we'll discuss later, it's in quite a crazy maze. I'd say very fitting for a Sonic stage, if you ask me. Apart from all that, the movie also depicts us with, Sonic the Hedgehog learning that he has to be more and more responsible when it comes to being like who he is, because at his current age, he's not really the kind of character that would be fitting for a hero, not yet at least. But you do understand the fact that Tom Wachowski kind of wants to be like a father figure to him, knowing the fact that Sonic never had anyone that was sort of like in his own league before Tails and eventually Knuckles decide to team up and be friends with him. And it's a really good chemistry between the two. It's like a been there, done that sort of situation, but I appreciate it in Sonic since, for years, Sonic's definitely been depicted as like the leader guy. And this story definitely gives us a new way of depicting Sonic the Hedgehog as someone that needs a bit of like down to earth guidance or someone who feels more well versed with how to handle, big moments like these to some extent. Wachowski is a police officer, of course. Eventually, Sonic is taking responsibility of taking care of the house along with the pet dog. However, things start to go a bit concerning when it comes to the fact that Tails starts to pop up and meet up with Sonic. All at the same time, we also deal with the likes of Robotnik and Knuckles breaking and entering into Sonic's house and causing quite a bit of destruction, if you ask me. And I don't know what happened to the dog. I hope the dog's alright. Maybe it was alright. It's been a while since I've seen the movie. But apart from all that, it was great to see the sort of differences between Sonic and Knuckles. Because at first glance, you could say, oh, like Knuckles is just like Sonic, but stronger. But you get a sense of just how different their fighting styles are. Sonic is more about, pretty much being about agility and speed. Knuckles is more about strength and combat. And I appreciate the fact that they're able to show off the sort of differences between one another, especially since it kind of goes for like sort of equally opposite sort of like dichotomy that I guess would fit well for the Sonic characters like these two. We meet up with Tails, and the two of them decide to escape at the best of their ability, although they kind of struggle when it comes to things like trying to avoid any sort of trouble. I mean, they pretty much were in like some sort of like tavern that nearly got them killed if it weren't for their ability to like dance well. But they managed to escape after winning, and we're actually getting a bit of like you know some hospitality for a little bit before they went on their adventure to look for any more clues regarding where they can find the Master Emerald and keep it away from Robotnik and Knuckles. During all this, we also get to see like a subplot that involves Stone wanting to meet up with like Robotnik again after missing him since the events of the first movie ended, as well as the fact that he kind of feels like it initially seemed like it was going to be some sort of a unique um, like love triangle of sorts with between Stone as well as Robotnik and Knuckles, but I believe the fact that Robotnik starts to become much more manipulative and less caring for anyone else that's around him And I guess that'll kind of affect Stone when he realizes the fact that Robotnik started to care for him less and less, which is something we're about to see with Knuckles when, like Eggman starts to take away and I meant to say Robotnik, takes away the Master Emerald while Sonic and Knuckles fight against each other. But during all this, it's kind of cool to see that the coffee shop becomes, the technology of the Robotnik tech, the home of it essentially. It's all good stuff. It is kind of amusing that we get to see like Stone try and put in the face of Robotnik on, coffee. You know how people like make little like shapes or images of their coffee. Like that's kind of like neat, although it definitely kind of seems very impatient like. But yeah, during all this, he misses Robotnik a lot and wants to have some way of getting it back. And I can definitely appreciate the fact that he definitely didn't feel like a side character that would just be there for the sake of having a big name. And that honor sort of goes to the characters involved in the wedding subplot, which isn't awful. Like, it definitely kind of reminds me of an Adam Sandler movie. Not that it makes the movie suck, but at least some of the humor was kind of funny, especially when they're trying to use like all the gadgets that Tails have at one point. Well, speaking of, I also got to say that I like the adventures between Sonic and Tails. It's great to see like another character that's similar to Sonic be involved with the adventures, especially after like just having Sonic on his own. And it's also great that it's not just those two that are involved, but it's also Knuckles that's taking on the action, the Winter Soldier taking on the blue blur of Justice. I did kind of feel bad for Tails. I initially thought they were gonna like split up at one point and not see eye to eye with each other, but the Sonic pretty much getting Tails injured and knocking him out temporarily actually made sense because it kind of showcased how Sonic wasn't quite like the kind of character that would be ready, like that'd be kind of like expected to have responsibility of having someone get himself injured in some way, shape, or form. He wasn't used to this sort of thing, and now he has to try and way to make up for it, especially since like he didn't expect Tails to look up to him in some way, see him as a friend, and that was very touching because most people probably expect Tails to just be like a character that would just be there, just to be like a cute partner for Sonic, but he looks up to Sonic and is benefiting in his own way. Like, he's very intelligent, making up for some of his other abilities. Well, in addition to him being able to fly with his twin tails. But it's always great to see stuff like the friendship between Sonic and Tails, and eventually Knuckles when he realizes that he was kind of like duped by Robotnik. And it's also like fantastic to see the three characters team up during the final battle. I love like that kind of reminds me just how much I'm always excited to see Team Sonic form because on top of it being a great primary color scheme trio, you get a sense that like something that I've learned ever since playing Sonic Heroes at a young age is that each character matters in one way, shape, or form. Sonic's definitely the best with his leadership skills, in addition to him being fast. Knuckles is great with his combat. Tails is great with his smarts. Like the three of them make the perfect trinity, if you ask me. And I can always like imagine myself playing like the Team Sonic theme in my head, or the Sonic Heroes theme, just because Sonic Heroes is great. No one can say otherwise. But yeah, it was great to see those three go up against the Eggman robot until we start to see like Sonic pretty much try and survive during all the final moments, especially with the fact that like he was in his last few breaths until we got the Master Emerald, which broke into pieces and became the power source for Supersonic. Especially after like Knuckles and Tails were able to extract the Master Emerald away from Robotnik, who was using it to power his robot. Which I gotta say, the fact that it actually looks like the Eggman robot after using all those parts, that kind of shows just how it is a great sign of showing the fact that it could have been like a typical Robo design, but the fact that it resembles Eggman kind of gives me much more faith that we're starting to stray away less and less from the Green Hills type setting and more into the world of Sonic. And I'll get more into that if I ever make a video regarding what I want from Sonic 3. But yeah, like all this stuff is great. The final battle is pretty sweet, especially when it comes to us expecting the trio to like kind of struggle a bit before Team Sonic decide to split up and find different ways to take him down together. And Sonic doing the final blow as Supersonic. It's kind of amusing that Knuckles kind of worries that Sonic wouldn't be the same with the Master Emerald powers until He someone's a chili dog, and yeah, he's still the same Sonic. I gotta say, speaking of characters, Tails and Knuckles definitely steal the show immensely. Tails himself is great to go with Sonic, looking up to him as I mentioned before. But Knuckles is just my favorite. He's like I think people are kind of like miss when Knuckles used to be a character they can find as badass. I mean, sure, he was kind of stupid in some instances, but I kind of like the balance of like the kind of character he was in the earlier games. I still like Knuckles though. I just kind of like some of his later appearances a bit okay. This version of Knuckles is definitely my favorite. I like the fact that he's much more different from Sonic, having a more serious like tribe leader influence from his mannerisms to his voice by Idris Elba. I believe I mispronounced his name. I also like the fact that he kind of had a similar backstory to Sonic. They lost something, but Knuckles realizes that it's not just like power that makes someone who they are, but it's also just like the heart of the person. And that's something he learned when it comes to Sonic's devotion to never giving up no matter what happens. And it's always good to see that, he's still kind of himself when he's living with everyone else. I kind of hope that we get to see this sort of personality remain because I kind of don't want it to be like more of a comedic relief constantly. The balance that we got with this movie is the perfect sort of balance for Knuckles' character, if you ask me, especially if we make him more of a good guy. But yeah, like definitely Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is a fantastic movie all around for video games. I just think that if you were to ask me anything regarding Sonic the Hedgehog 3, well, we're already getting ourselves a sneak peek at Shadow the Hedgehog in one of the tanks as a very important piece of history regarding uh, robotics stuff. And it looks like Agent Stone's still around. We're not sure if Eggman's going to come back, or Robotnik, I should say, because Jim Carrey doesn't think he can be involved with acting anymore. In fact, he's going to retire. That kind of sucks, but I guess this is a perfect way to end off on, Robotnik story arcs, and perhaps we can pass the torch to Agent Stone, who's going to be much more hellbent on killing Sonic and friends for what they did to Robotnik. So yeah, I could definitely say that this movie was great all around. Like, admittedly, the first part was a little like been there, done that, with the same sort of style as the first movie. But the moment we start getting into, um, like the moment like after like the like right when we start with like the Sonic versus Knuckles fight at the house, that's when the movie starts to win me over a lot, and much sooner than like what happened with No Way Home, I'd say, because most of the first part of No Way Home was just like typical MCU stuff for Spider-Man. But I guess the legacy characters did save it. But thankfully, I'd say that Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is a better movie than No Way Home because, like, sure, No Way Home was fun to watch with all with like the nostalgic characters and the legacy stuff, but it kind of felt reactionary. It kind of felt like they used that because they know for a fact that after what happened um, with Disney finding out that like they're being the greedy motherfuckers back in 2019, they thought, okay, we'll try to apologize. Like, we'll bring in these older characters to keep fans happy. And when you look into it, some stuff was like not that impressive when it comes to the visual effects being like hit or miss. And I'll say the visual effects here are kind of hit or miss for some stuff. Like the explosions for the drones do feel like fake. Not to expect them to be like practical effects, because I know for a fact that someone like Michael Bay is great with practical explosions, but that's not really like the kind of an issue that would kind of ruin the movie for me, especially since like the more I watch No Way Home or think about it, the more I kind of feel like there's some stuff that could have been like handled better. Whereas here, I think that Sonic the Hedgehog 2, the only thing I didn't like was just like some of the first parts of it, but the rest of the movie was just fantastic all around. And I look forward to seeing the rest of Sonic's universe in this style. Hopefully, we stray ourselves less and less from the live action setting, as we said before, and go even further into Sonic's world for this movie era. And I also look forward to seeing what we'll get from the Knuckles the Echidna series on Paramount Plus, which hopefully can be a lot better done than the Halo series, if you ask me, because there's some stuff about that show that's kind of a mixed bag, which we'll get to some other time. Next up, we'll be talking about LEGO Star Wars: The Skywalker Saga. I gotta say that this game is great when it comes to depicting all the characters in one massive game. I think the reliance on DLC will probably be much smaller from what I remember, but more importantly, This game is great just for the fact that it's able to feel like one complete package. I think the problem with video games these days is the fact that they just rely so heavily on DLC. People will either rip them to shreds and then forget about the upgrades for the DLC afterwards, or probably like be okay, it's not that bad. Kind of like with like the DLC for Battlefront's EA games or EA Battlefront games, I should say. Or it's with Nintendo. It's like, oh no, don't worry, guys. Like it'll be fine. It's a good game still. Just like kid use a little more stuff, and then they forget about the games afterwards. Or like they'll just eat it up nonetheless. They'll be like, "Oh, Nintendo, why would you do this?" Like they make all these long ass videos about Nintendo being a bad company, and then they like eat it up nonetheless because that's what Nintendo fans are like. I swear to God. But Lego Star Wars: The Skywalker Saga, I do think is the opposite of that. It's more than just like a graphical overhaul of Lego in terms of its games. It works well for the fact that it's able to be an evolution to what we've seen before. Lego games in their own way have been kind of repetitive in terms of, like the gameplay style and whatnot, how you manage things. And over time, we've seen them evolve stuff with the open worlds and like Lego Batman 2, as well as the voice acting, the amount of characters you can play with, the small reliance on DLC for some instances. But I think that like the Skywalker Saga is peak Lego game content overall, especially when it comes to the way it manages everything so wonderfully. We're no longer the days where everything is like with a simple 3 combo attack like we've seen with the normal lightsaber character. We're way past that. We're much more evolved. We can use new ways of attacking characters. We can upgrade characters. We can go to different settings. And it's also great when it comes to the fact that like it knows how to feel like a modern day video game while still keeping that Lego charm. Because Lego games are meant to be more accessible to players. That's something I understood when I was much younger. They're simple, they're fun games to play. There's really no consequences apart from being unable to complete True Jedi status or losing out on studs, so you can't buy the characters you want right away if you keep failing. But like it's meant to be something that's like accessible. I think this game's able to make it still feel accessible while still making it much more complex, especially with modern games having much more to work with. It's kind of funny how like the original games were a little more casual in terms of like the tone, especially the first 2 Lego Star Wars games. They had a bit of more comedic elements to them, but not enough to actually like make them deviate themselves entirely from the tone of the movies. Like okay, like some of the mumbling did kind of make them more comedic and whatnot, but they're somewhat visual cues since they weren't reliant on like voice acting at the time, and it made sense just for a more cartoony game. But I do think that the original games were able to make it like a proper, like sort of like cartoon style approach with the scenes in the movies without deviating themselves too much entirely. I will say though, it's kind of weird. People have been praising the game for including like the mumble mode, yet a lot of the cutscenes are depicting the game without it. I guess it's just to show off the fact that they want to rely so much on the prequel meme stuff. But the sad thing is that on a lot of YouTube gameplay, because of how stupidly stingy the Walt Disney Company is with its conglomerate grubby ass fingers, you can't really play any of the music during the cutscenes on YouTube stuff. So you're pretty much forced to leave the music out, which is kind of silly if you ask me. I think some like the Lego games from the past didn't really have this much of an issue, at least from the videos I've seen in terms of like the cutscenes and gameplay and whatnot. But I guess here, because it's a more modern like piece of media, they don't want to get as much trouble. Either way, though, it's like kind of like stupid on Disney's part because people want to actually make these videos for fun. Like I know people like use YouTube nowadays for money, but I think the intent here is like harmless all around. They just want to like have a good time and showing off why they love these games or this game to be exact. Yeah, like you definitely see that people have had fun with like having characters interact with one another, playing in different settings, all the Easter eggs. It's great. I'm just happy to see that we get ourselves like a much more elaborate Lego game because, like I said before, Lego games for years have been quite stale and repetitive in terms of the gameplay style. Like, sure, you have a few new mechanics, but those are mostly themed towards the specific IP that it's based on. Like Star Wars itself has all the Star Wars tropes you'd expect from the Force to piloting vehicles, and especially like having different powers related to specific characters. Like Indiana Jones had more adventure theme. It also had specific attacks meant for certain characters, like Indiana Jones with his whip. Some characters like to come with like a normal sword, or some characters can dig stuff up or solve puzzles. And some characters like Lego Batman, you have like the good guys with their own batarangs. Some characters have like their own powers, like Joker with his buzzer, or uh, Killer Croc is immune to toxic waste and is also very strong. But at the end of the day, like these are all powers that are similar to what we've seen before. There's not much of a difference between um, like Henry Jones using a book to solve a puzzle in a manner similar to like C3PO using a control panel. Like at the end of the day, it's a similar function. Using a character meant for a specific location to like help access a hidden area, whether it's part of the intended level or part of like the free play. This game refreshes all that and makes the characters feel much more well versed with what they can do, and making it feel more like an elaborate like Star Wars game while still keeping the Lego feel all around. And it's done quite well, if you ask me. It's a nice change of pace after the sort of constant like approach we've seen with the past. And honestly, like it kind of like feels great because a lot of the games for a good while kind of felt like stale and repetitive when it comes to just how they do stuff like that. I mean, I keep on saying stale and repetitive, but the point still stands. There's so much you can do with like the Lego style of gameplay that I appreciate the Skywalker Saga for immensely overhauling it. In some ways, it kind of feels like this would work well for like Lego Star Wars Battlefront, but it's mostly just because of the gameplay. Which, yeah, like the gameplay is definitely different. Back then you could run around shooting enemies as a normal platform, whereas here it's much more complex, much more like first or third person shooter inspired. Like it's great stuff, and it's also amazing when you get to see just how uh like complicated things have been, while still being easy to keep up with. There's some stuff that's a little like kind of like unexpected. Like for example, when you're racing in the Mos Espa pod race, like in the old games, you can pretty much like retry no problem. But whereas here, you're pretty much saying, "Oh, you failed. Do you want to try again?" That was strange. Like I remember playing like because the old style like the old Lego games. I'm so used to like just not making it in time and just saying, "Okay, we'll try again. I'll lose some studs, no problem, so long as I have like true Jedi status." Yeah, it's one of those things that's like very weird, especially if you're like not used to playing the more modern stuff. But overall, Lego Star Wars: The Skywalker Saga is a fantastic experience, and I think fans will be more than happy with this. I'm going to be honest and say that the Walt Disney Company's handling of Star Wars is kind of amusing, especially when the fans going to have this sort of like, I can't stand Disney Star Wars, and then 5 minutes later, me and the besties. So the fact that we get this sort of thing is just like appreciative all around. I think this is the best you're going to get from Disney Star Wars. I'm not sure how much they'll do with the DLC. Like, I haven't really been paying attention because of work and stuff. Looking for work and stuff, looking for work and stuff. Cookie if you get the reference. But yeah, if you get this game, you're going to be more than happy with it. And I would say it's definitely like much better than say them putting out like the first Battlefront game from EA or The Force Awakens, because those clearly feel like they're just cashing in on the brand. And you can say the same thing for this one too, but at least it feels a lot more like there's a case of them trying to put as much effort in this game than expected. More than just graphics. It's more than just the quantity, it's also just about the quality, and thankfully this game manages to do both quality and quantity very well. And finally, we'll be taking a look at Morbius, which I know a lot of people are making memes about just how like it's one of the movies of all time. Morbius sweep, Leto sweep. People still doing like either like the typical Sony bashing or trying to act like it's the worst movie ever. Jared Leto bashing, even though like it's kind of amusing how some people call him a creep and a pedo, even though they kind of defend James Gunn's tweets. But that's a different story for another time, I guess. I don't know. But ignoring all that, ignoring the ironic praise of Morbius, it's an okay movie, Like, it's not awful, awful, but at the same time, it's not anything that special. Like, I'm not going to go against Sony for trying to make their own cinematic universe. I mean, I'd rather them try to do their own things than try to, like, constantly rely on Disney and the MCU, which I kind of wish would end at some point, but heaven forbid you ever say that. But the thing about Morbius is the fact that it kind of feels like it's them trying to do what made Venom work, but not as well. Like the visual effects are all right. The story itself isn't that anything that special. The cast performances are all right. Um, like Jared Leto's Morbius character is not too shabby, but I don't think he's as memorable as Venom. In fact, I think that's the problem with the movie as a whole. It's not as memorable as what we got with the two Venom movies. What I liked about the Venom movies is the fact they're able to make themselves something you can enjoy no problem, because they're not trying to be like a big cinematic universe story. They're pretty much like pretty effective stories for Venom himself. With the two of them meeting together and taking on Riot, as well as the second movie having them split up for a bit and realize that they could definitely depend on one another, especially now that Carnage is involved. Honestly, Let There Be Carnage itself could have been better than the first one, but a shorter story and a somewhat punches pulled in certain instances kind of pushed it back. But I think both movies worked out a lot better than I think with Morbius. Because at the end of the day, they knew how to make themselves simple but effective movies that aren't trying to be the next big thing. Nor are they trying to make themselves like they're just part of the important movies you have to watch just so you can get this sort of idea together. The Sony Spider-Man universe isn't a terrible idea. I just think that some stuff kind of doesn't have the same sort of longevity. With this though, I just kind of feel like Venom itself works well because it knows how to like do a better job with how to make itself last as much as it needs to. Morbius, on the other hand, I think they're trying to go for Synergy 6 route or trying to build up everything. The cameo appearance by Michael Keaton himself is weird though. We got a reference to him in the trailer way back in 2020, but what was the point of it though? I think it would have made more sense if he was in No Way Home. At least that would have had a bit of synergy for him. But his cameo appearance there just seems rather strange. I know they're trying to build up some sort of connectivity between the Sony stuff and the MCU stuff with Tom Holland Spider-Man, but this just feels weird if you ask me. This movie kind of reminds me a lot of Elektra in a way, where it's pretty much trying to capitalize on the success of a movie that was made for a much more recognizable character. Although the difference is that whereas the 2003 Daredevil movie was mediocre, and the extended cut was not too bad. The first Venom movie was actually not too shabby for a popcorn flick because it doesn't try to make itself look like it was it's not trying to capitalize on either X-Men or Spider-Man success. Instead, trying to make itself be a Venom movie and B's Venom movie. Whereas Elektra just felt like it was trying to be some sort of cool spin-off on Daredevil, but nobody cares about that movie. In fact, I think Elektra worked better in the Netflix show than she did in the Fox movie. And that's sort of the same way I feel with Morbius. At the end of the day, it's a decent movie all around. There's nothing that you're gonna get too pissed off about unless you're one of those MCU stands or you have a stupidly big hate boner for Sony. But it's okay at best. If you want to watch a Sony movie, just watch the Raimi trilogy or watch the Tasm films, or I'd say even watch Venom or Spider-Verse. And that Spider-Verse, sure, people will be like, oh, it's for kids and it's got jokes in it, but what worked about that is that it had a very good foundation for it and made it much more engaging. Whereas this, it's okay, but nothing I'd really want to rewatch constantly. So that's all I have to say about Morbius. I know people are going to defend it a lot because of the hate it got, and I don't think the hate's justified, but it doesn't necessarily mean that Morbius as a movie is good because it's filler compared to the Venom stuff. If I'm going to be real with you, but that'll do for today's episode. Yeah, I can definitely tell that Morbius stuff is yeah, I just had to share my own 2 cents on it. That's pretty much it. It's okay movie, but yeah, definitely watch Sonic the Hedgehog 2, and that's really it's okay movie. Wow. Yeah, that's all I have to say. I'll see you guys next time for the next episode. Until then, take care.